Welcome to Nadis Eduk TV under the Applied Track Subject Practical Research 1. Moving on to the next chapter, which is Chapter 3, the content, understanding data and ways to systematically collect data. Our competency for today is focused on the guidelines in crafting and creating your Chapter 3. Our lesson title is Tips for My Working Study at 3. The learning objectives or our specific objectives for today. After the lesson, you should be able to 1. Determine the parts of chapter 3. Number 2. Explain the parts included in chapter 3. Number 3. Creates or crafts your chapter 3. Cite the importance of each parts of the research in your working study. Dive into our topic. Parts of Chapter 3, Tips in Creating and Crafting Your Chapter 3, Research Design and Methodology. We have Qualitative Research Methods, Sources of Data, Key Respondents of the Study, Data Gathering Instruments, Data Gathering Procedure, and the Reference. What is a qualitative social science research? Qualitative social science research is referred in various ways by different authors either as qualitative research, qualitative studies, descriptive research, descriptive studies, etc. Many authors have defined it differently due to its wide-ranging and open-ended nature. One author defined qualitative research as research studies that investigate the quality of relationships, activities, situations, or materials, according to Frankel and Wallen of 1993. Another author defined qualitative research as a situated activity that locates the observer in the world, consisting of a set of interpretative material practices that make the world visible. In qualitative research, researchers study things in their natural settings, attempting to make a sense of or to interpret phenomena in terms of meanings people bring to them. So what are the methods used in qualitative research? We have observation, interview, and content analysis. So what is observation? Observation is a major data collection method in scientific research. It is considered as the most sophisticated as well as the most basic tool of scientific discovery. So remember, observation is an activity that we undertake in daily life. We observe the weather so that we can decide what to wear or if we should bring along an umbrella. We observe the flow of traffic so that we can cross the street safely. We observe our co-passenger on the jeep because we are curious. We observe the display in shop windows because we are interested. But this kind of ordinary observation is not sufficient to be considered a method for scientific inquiry. Observation is found at the beginning and at the end of scientific inquiry. At the start of research, a research question or problem is formulated, and this is almost always based on observation of a phenomenon. At the completion of the study, one can validate the result by going back to observing the phenomenon. So when is observation scientific? When it serves a formulated research objective, when it is systematically designed, when it is systematically documented, when it is related to theoretical or conceptual framework, when subjected to checks on validity and reliability. What is the strengths of observation? Observation records an event simultaneously as it happens spontaneously. Observations offers data that are directly relevant to typical conditions of behavior. In contrast, other research methods are based solely on persons' recall of their past behavior or their forecast of their future behavior. There is distortion and detachment in these processes of recollection and anticipation. Indeed, what people say and what they actually do can be two different things. This is why many researchers combine observation and interview to capture what people do and say. Example, a researcher who is studying the gender division of farm labor can observe the roles that women and men perform in the farm. An interview may not capture the nuances of the topic. Still in the strength of observation, observation records certain kinds of behavior that are taken for granted by the subject. Example, a farmer may not be able to describe in details his daily activities, but a researcher can observe what he does. Observation does not depend on the subject's ability to speak. It offers data about subjects who cannot speak. Example, a researcher studying child rearing practices in a rural community cannot interview infant but can observe their behavior and how they are cared for. Observation does not depend on the subject's willingness to speak. It requires less of active participation of the subject. It is difficult for subjects to alter their behavior in real-life event. For example, a busy housewife may not be willing to be interviewed but may consent to a researcher's observation of her activities. What are the limitations of observation? It is difficult to forecast the spontaneous occurrence of an event to guarantee that we are present to observe it. Example, a researcher may aim to document rural folks' burial practices, but a death in the community may not happen during the scheduled fieldwork. Some events demand extreme emotional and physical endurance on the part of the observer. Example, during a disaster such as tsunami or during a hit-and-run accident, a researcher may not be able to use observation for data collection because of the emotional and physical aspect of the situation. Unpredictable factors may serve as barriers to observations. Example, a researcher's observation of an outdoor event such as women's daily get-together in an open arena can be interrupted by bad weather. Because of the three previously cited limitations, observational methods are usually more costly than interviewing. The lengthy duration of some events can restrict observation. So observation is difficult. For example, if it is not possible or impossible to use life history. Some events or phenomena are often not accessible to direct observation of an outsider. For example, a researcher studying sexual behavior or family planning practices cannot use observation to gather data. Here are the checklist of what to observe: the participants, the setting, the purpose, the social behavior, and the frequency and duration. So on the participants, who are the participants? This includes age, sex, education, occupation. So how are they related to one another? Example, neighbors, boss employee, landlord tenants, teachers, students, buyer and seller. So how many are there? How many of each relational type of women and men, of children and senior citizens? For the setting, appearance, or what we call the physical or the spatial dimension of the setting, the social characteristics, what kind of behavior the setting encourages or permits, discourages or prevents. Example, the physical setting of a church has a social characteristics very different from those of a market. On the purpose, what has brought the participants together? Is it by chance? Is there an official purpose? Example, we have the farmers meeting, funeral, birthday, and party. How do participants react to the official purpose of the situation? Is it with acceptance or resistance? What goals, other than the official purpose of the situation, do the participants seem to be pursuing? Example, in a seminar, some farmers may be chatting with each other instead of listening to the speaker. Are the goals of the various participants compatible or antagonistic? Let's give another example. Are the goals of the chatting farmers compatible with the farmers who came to listen and learn from the seminar? For the social behavior, what actually happens? What do the participants do? With whom they do it? With what do they do it? Objects such as tools. With respect to the behavior, we should know the following. 1. What was the stimulus or event that limited it? Number 2, what happens to be its objectives? Number 3, towards whom or what it is the behavior directed? Number 4, what is the form of activity entailed in the behavior? Example, eating, walking, digging. Number 5, what are the qualities of each behavior? Is it intensity, persistence, usefulness, appropriateness, duration, effectivity, and mannerism? And 6, what are the effects of reactions? So this means what the behavior does, it evokes from others. For the frequency and duration, when did the situation occur? How long did it last? Is it a recurring type of situation or unique? If it occurs or recurs, how frequently does it occur? What are the situations that give rise to it? how typical a such situation is the one being observed. Moving on to the methods used in qualitative research, the interview. What is interview? Interview is defined as a conversation with a purpose, which is to gather information on a research problem. It goes without saying that the character of an interview in social research depends on the aim of the research and the type of interview appropriate for the purpose. What are the types of interview questions? Background or demographic questions. Find out the background characteristics of respondents. Knowledge questions. Find out what the respondents consider factual information. Experience or behavior questions. Find out what the respondent is doing or has done. Opinion or values questions. Find out what people think about some topic or issue. Feelings questions. Find out how respondents feel about things. Sensory questions. Find out what a respondent has seen, heard, tasted, smelled, or touched. What are the types of interview? Structured interview, what we call formal or standardized. Semi-structured interview, semi-standardized or focused. Unstructured interview, informal or non-directive. Key informant interview, focus group discussions. The important features of structured interview: most formally standardized, no deviation from question order, working of each question asked exactly as written, no adjusting of level of language, no clarification or answering of question about the interview, no additional questions may be added, similar in forms to a pencil and paper survey. So what are the interview requirements? Interviewer plays a neutral role. Interviewer never interjects his or her opinion on a respondent's answer. Interviewer must establish a balanced rapport, be casual and friendly on the one hand, but directive and impersonal on the other. Interviewer must be an interested listener, reward and respondent's participation, but does not evaluate the responses. What are the strengths of structured interview? The researcher has relatively maximum control over what takes place in the interview. The interview is reliable in the sense that the same format is used with each respondent. The identity of the interviewer should have minimal impact on the responses obtained. The structured format makes for relatively greater speed in data collection. There are limitations of a structured interview. It deliberately limits what the respondent can talk about, thereby missing out the novel aspects of subjects not predicted or anticipated by the researcher. It is unlikely that the approach allows the unraveling of complexity or ambiguity of the respondent's position on topic. The interview can become stilted because of the need to ask questions in exactly the same format and sequence to each respondent. Semi-structured interview or semi-standardized or focused. Important features of semi-structured interview. The interview is guided by the interview schedule rather than dictated by it. There is an attempt to establish rapport with the respondent. Questions may be recorded during the interview. Wording of questions is flexible and level of language may be adjusted. The interviewer is free to probe interesting areas that arise. The interview can follow the respondent's interests or concern and thereby result in a richer data. How to construct semi-structured interview. Identify the question areas or themes that will be covered in the interview. Order the themes in an appropriate sequence using such rules of thumb as logical order and sensitive topics in later part of interview. Think of appropriate questions related to each theme and sequence the questions. Try to use open, not closed questions. For some research problems, funneling may be used. In this technique, the first question elicits the respondent's general view of the research problem. Then, the interviewer asks more specific issues. Think of possible probes and prompts which could be used following answers that might be given to some of the questions. Unstructured interview is also called focus interview, informal, conversational, and standardized interview. Its central characteristics is that it is open-ended. The major features of an unstructured interview that sets it apart from structured interview is not only in terms of format or degree of being structured, but the concern for the point of view of the interviewee. In an unstructured interview, provide qualitative depth by pertaining interviewees to talk about the topic in terms of their own ideas and meanings. An unstructured interview provide a deeper understanding of the interviewees frames and reference and perspectives. Unstructured interviews are precise than structured to get the perspectives of the insider of social phenomena. So what are the strengths of an structured interview? It allows the interviewees to reply to questions within the specific frames of reference or context. It provides a challenge to the perception or preconceptions of the interviewer. The key informant interview. Key informant interviews are interviews of chosen individuals or groups which are selected because they are likely to offer needed data on a specific topic. Key informants are members of the subject community who are knowledgeable about the topic and are willing to talk about the topic. For example, the local medicine person, we call it in our town albularyo or hilot, may be a key informant to be interviewed on the topic on medicinal plants. Key informants are not just anyone that we met in the community. They must be key or directly relevant to our study. They are the local expert on specific topics. We must be able to explain why they are key to our study. We must provide a profile of each key informant interviewed. Key informants are selected or sampled based on the objectives of the study. We call it purposive sampling. So what are the strengths of key informant interview? They provide data and insight that cannot be obtained with other methods. This is because the information comes directly from knowledgeable people. They provide flexibility to explore new ideas and issues that had not been anticipated in designing the study. Most social scientists have the training and experience required to conduct key informant interviews. They are not expensive to conduct. So what are the limitations of key informant interview? They are not appropriate for quantitative data collection because of the very limited basis for quantification. Results can be biased if the informants are not carefully chosen. Results are susceptible to interview biases. Example, interview may give more credence to elite views than to those of lower socioeconomic strata. It may be hard to show validity of the results if only a few people are interviewed. It is also hard to prove that the interviewees are indeed knowledgeable and that they are representative of their peers in their information. So how to select key informants? Selection of the right informants determine the quality of key informants interviews. By definition, key informants must possess expert knowledge of the subject based on their unique social statuses, experiences, or professional expertise. So we have two steps. First step, identify the relevant groups from which the key informants can be chosen. Example, in a study of the impact of a project on indigenous women, the relevant groups may be 1. The indigenous women who are participated in the project. 2. The indigenous women who did not participate. The project staff, the local government officials, and the non-indigenous people in the community. Second step, choose a few informants from each group. You may consult some knowledgeable persons or you may get additional names suggested by selected informants themselves. Moving on to the last, focus group discussion. FGs are a form of qualitative research method that uses the group setting to discuss a specific set of issues derived from the research objectives. Although variously referred to as a group interviews and focus group discussion, FG is a generic concept that encompasses the different variations of and method has taken in research practice. Each group is focused in that entails some kind of collective activity such as discussing a particular research questions, analyzing a common problem, or examining a particular course of action to take on a specific concern. What distinguishes an FG from other forms of research method is the explicit use of group interaction as data research or research data. So what are the features of focus group discussion? Group discussions explore a specific set of issues. Groups are focused on some kinds of collective activity. FGs differ from group interviews by the explicit use of group interaction to generate data. Focus group researchers encourage participants to talk to one another. When is focus group appropriate? FGs are ideal for exploring people's experiences, opinions, wishes, and concerns. FGs examine people's different perspectives as they operate within a social network. FGs explore how accounts are articulated, censored, posts, and changed through social interaction. FGs are better for exploring how points of view are constructed and expressed. FGs are invaluable for examining how knowledge, ideas, storytelling, self-presentation operate within a given cultural context. FG are often used in the study of attitudes and experiences around specific topics. What are the advantages of focus group? It highlights the participants' attitudes, priorities, language, and framework of understanding, encourages a great variety of communication for participants, tapping into a wide range of forms and understanding, helps to identify group norms, provide insight to the operation of group social processes in the articulation of knowledge, can encourage open conversation about embarrassing subjects and facilitate the expression of ideas and experiences that might be left undeveloped in an interview. Group interaction can explore differences between group participants and can use conflict between participants in order to clarify why people believe what they do, can explore the arguments of people use against each other, can analyze how particular forms of speech facilitate inhibits peer communication, and what are the limitations of focus group discussion. FGs are not appropriate for obtaining quantitative information and explaining how many people hold certain opinions. Participants are sometimes hesitant to actively participate in a group discussion on a very sensitive topic. It is sometimes difficult to convene people to an FG setting because of time, distance, and cost constraints. On to the last qualitative research method, which is the content analysis. Content analysis is a research technique for the objective, systematic, and quantitative description of the manifest content of communication. The basic goal of content analysis is to take a verbal, non-quantitative document and transform it into quantitative data. Thus, content analysis is a methodology for transforming various kinds of documents, speeches, presentation, and other recorded social phenomena into a form that social scientists can analyze by means of statistical tests. In content analysis, there is a systematic quantification of verbal and written materials into numeric form for mathematical and statistical analysis. Among the most important sources of data for content analysis are A. Written documents, B. Filmed documents, and C. Records. What are the tasks of content analysts? First, draw the sample documents. The primary step is to compile sampling frame or a list of units from which the sample is to be drawn. After the sampling frame is constructed, most of the sampling techniques discussed earlier can be used. Second, define the content of categories. This depends upon the purpose of the study. The categories selected must be exhaustive, mutually exclusive, and independent. By independent, it meant that the value of one category does not determine the value of another category. Third, define the recording unit. This includes the single word or symbol, the theme, which is the purpose of or goal of the document or portion of a document, the character, usually in the documents such as the novel, plays, television dramas, and movie scripts, in which the recording units is the particular person and the number of persons fitting into each of the categories recorded. Next, the sentence or paragraph. Next, the item, which refers to the entire article, film, book, radio program, TV shows, etc. Fourth, we have defined the context unit. The recording unit must be examined in the context so that researchers often use a context unit, which is a larger unit that includes the recording unit. Thus, if the recording unit is a word, then the context unit may be a sentence, paragraph, or theme. The fifth, define the system of enumeration, quantify data in content analysis. Simple binary coding to indicate whether or not the category appears in the document, frequency with which the category appears in the document, amount of space allotted to the category, strength or intensity with which the category is represented. Moving on to the next part of chapter 3, we have sources of data. So what is sources of data in research? Data sources can include data that are already collected and data that will be collected during the study. Data sources can be used to describe different data collection methods and or tools. So what are the methods of collecting primary data? We have direct personal investigation, indirect oral investigation, information through correspondence, telephonic interview, mailed questionnaire, the questionnaire filled by enumerator. What is a data source in qualitative research? The sources of data for qualitative research came from or come from many sources, including documentation, interviews, observation, audiovisual record, and physical artifacts, according to Creswell of 2012. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 3, the key informants of the study. Moving on, key informants of the study. Within the context of survey research, key informants refers to the person with whom an interview about organization, social program, problem, or interest group is conducted. In a sense, the key informant is a proxy for his or her associates as at the organization or group. Key informants are qualitative, in-depth interviews with people who know what is going on in the community. The purpose of the key informant interview is to collect information from a wide range of people, including community leaders, professionals, or residents who have the first-hand knowledge about the community. Moving on to data gathering instruments. So what is data gathering instrument? Some research instrument examples are surveys, interviews, and focus groups. Surveys can be used to collect quantitative data from large group, while interviews and focus groups gather qualitative data from smaller groups of participants. Let's move on. Research design and methodology under data gathering procedure. What is data gathering procedure? Data gathering procedure, or what we call data collection, is the process of gathering and measuring information on variables of interest in an established systematic fashion that enables one to answer stated research questions, test hypotheses, and evaluate outcomes. Moving on to the research design and methodology, the reference. Now on this slide, the reference. For more information about references or referencing, please watch tips on crafting and creating your chapter 1 on at Nadis EduTV because it was discussed there. What you see is the title from the Ludanco brothers, the discrimination experienced by COVID-19 patients in Castillo, Sorsogon, case study. Now, let's dive into the research study and unravel how they do it. Under this excerpt from the study of Ludanco brothers, their research design and methodology, their research uses qualitative research methods. Under Chapter 3, the research design and methodology, this chapter presents the methods that will be used in the study. This also provides discussion of the research methods, sources of data, key informants of the study, data gathering instrument, data gathering procedure, and statistical treatment. Also, this research uses qualitative research method, and according to Pritna Bandari of 2020, wherein they elaborate the definition of qualitative research. Plunging into their research methodology, here it further discusses the definition of a case study taken from Mills Durepos Weiby of 2010. Also, it stresses that a good selection of subjects may produce quality information. Moving on to another excerpts into the research methodology. Now, here in these excerpts are the things that the researcher will do to get the source of data and the key informants of the study. Moving on into the research methodology and key informants of the study. Now, here the researcher discusses the respondents of the study on how, where, when, what about the key informants. Also, the researcher will able to provide limitation as to the number of qualifications of the respondents for their study. Moving on into the research methodology on data gathering instruments of the study. Now here in data gathering instrument, the interview guide is the main instrument of the study, where there are 4 parts or 5 parts to be exact in their instrument. Moving on into the research methodology on data gathering procedure of their study. On their data gathering procedure, steps are prepared to gather the data. First is asking approval for the research title. Second, reading journals. So let us continue into the research methodology on data gathering procedure of the study. Third, we have pre-interview for the data gathering procedure, writing the interview guide, the consent, conducting the interview proper, and data consolidation and analysis. Moving on to the last part of our lesson is the rubrics. For your rubrics, part 1, submit a digital copy, that is 5 points, and part 2 is the content. For the content of your chapter 3, it will be rated using the following related questions. Or statements. Number one, the qualitative research design use is appropriate for the study. Number two, the sampling method use is appropriate for the research topic. Number three, the sample size is sufficient. Number four, the participants are described clearly. The number five, the research instruments used are appropriate for the research topic and questions. Number six, the data collection procedure is clear and complete. And number seven, the data analysis tests is appropriate for test study. Also, there are comments and suggestions on the other side and the scoring rubric. For the definition of terms, we have barriers, open-ended, physical endurance, sophisticated. Another three terms for definition of terms is spontaneous, unpredictable factors, and wide-ranging. So that ends our lesson, and the reference for this material taken from the book or the books of Brian Edward Ludanko and John Steven Ludanko of 2022 from Bicol University Department of Peace Studies, Daraga Albay, and some internet links or websites provided. Please do not forget to like, share, subscribe, click the notification bell, add comments on this video. Thank you very much. And for further information, the author is already here, the name, the address, and the purpose of this material. Thank you very much.